Hey, welcome to the pod, Bryan and Ryan. I'm Brian Houston. That's Ryan Peterson. Ryan was out last week on spring break, dude. How
Yeah, I
was
went to
it?
Florida. It was we had a good time. It was a long drive. I'm still recovering. Um, I think we walked. We had added up. It was about 55 to 60 miles over the week. So
That sounds
uh,
restful.
yeah, it wasn't a whole lot of rest, but and I apologize. I look like I'm still asleep. We're recording earlier than we normally do in the morning, but yeah, we had a good time. But long drive, 15-hour drive back, but
Ooh.
we had fun.
You do you party till you puke?
No, not with a 6 and 10-year-old. No.
I mean, you got to set the standard, man.
The only puking was my 6-year-old getting nauseous in the back seat.
Nice,
Coming back, that was fun.
nice. I, I hope you made it off the road in time to eject.
We did. Fortunately, we had several bags in the back seat too.
Oh
So
my goodness. Well, boy,
good
that
way to
paints
get
a
started this morning.
that paints a lovely picture. Thank you. Uh, I'm excited. I get my first dosage of coronavirus today, a
Oh,
vaccine.
do you?
Yeah, I'm kind of pumped up about that. I'm going to have the chip planted right here, so anytime you need me, you can find me. I'm really fired up about this.
Yeah, I'm seeing more and more people start to post and share that they're getting it. So
Yep. So,
um,
if I get a third eye right here, I'm fine with it. I mean, when you,
there are
when,
worse things than three eyes.
well, when you're 63, if you want to reinvent yourself, this is a perfect way to do it, so why not? So, so you weren't here last week, and you missed out on the biggest news to come down the pike in about 3 years with the Dallas Cowboys. They finally got a deal done with Dak Prescott that was probably 20 million more than it should have been from if they'd have done it 2 years ago. But
Yeah.
I thought Dak made out, he got paid what I think he should have gotten paid. And the Cowboys actually made it kind of cap friendly, so which is amazing considering the cap mess they were in going in. So what do you think about the whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, probably a couple of years later than it should have been. But I think the big thing for them is they got them locked in for the next 4 years. I don't think they really had a choice. I think we've seen if you don't have a quarterback, you just can't compete in the NFL. And I do get kind of annoyed by, we always say, oh, they overpaid, or he's not worth 40 million a year. Well, every year it changes. I mean, the number goes, and I know this year's a little bit different because COVID, but the cap is going to go back up, and it's probably going to explode much higher next year. So you can kick the can, as with the cap number each year. Look, you got to pay elite money for a good quarterback, and the argument is Dak one of the best. I certainly think he's one of the top 10. And you got to pay those guys if you want to keep them. I mean, what's the alternative? I didn't have a problem with the money because Dak's been playing for nothing, all this time anyway. So it makes up for some of that. And I think now, and assuming Dak's going to be healthy, I think looking at that division, as we've talked about in previous weeks, I think the Cowboys their goal needs to be that they're going to win this division. They're going to get back in the playoffs. I don't see the Giants or Eagles as real contenders. Washington, who won the division with a losing record. Interesting news today. They're getting Ryan Fitzpatrick, and he will be at least going into camp the penciled in starter.
He's 73 now, right?
Yeah, I think so. But he played well for Miami last year. I think the thing with Fitzmagic is it comes and goes. You don't know what you're going to get. But I mean, right now the Cowboys definitely have the best quarterback. And if they maybe get a couple good guys in the draft, and we'll see what they do in free agency. Now I think they can be like, okay, we're going to start a run here. Hopefully we can take over this division, and then from there get in the playoffs every year and see what happens. But had to do it. And I don't have a problem with the money. Look, it's going to go up each year. The money that Dak and Mahomes signed is going to look like pennies in a couple
Mhm.
years. So
Yeah, well, you look at Josh Allen's about to get here in a year or two, and people like that are in that draft class of the last year or so. I mean,
yeah,
next year their contracts are going to far surpass what
and
Dak.
we've already heard reports that the Ravens and Lamar Jackson aren't close on agreeing to their deal. He's going to be
See,
looking. He has an MVP to his name. So yeah, I mean Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. These contracts are going to keep going up. It's what happens.
the funny thing about it, one of the things that justifies it for me is that while Jared Goff and Carson Wentz both got their money within the 4-year contract, their rookie deal, they got paid and they got worse.
Right.
Dak has improved
Hmm.
every year. And that's the thing that people don't recognize is that not only did he come into the league and shock people with how well he played as a rookie, and granted, they were, they kept him under a really close leash that first year. The main goal of playing Dak when he was a rookie was don't make mistakes that lose the ball games, but he played well. But each year they've given him a little bit more leash. I mean, they gave him a lot of leash actually, and he's improved. And so, he's going to work. Okay, he's coachable. He's not going to be a petty little whining sissy like Carson Wentz when he gets coached or when he runs into adversity. Um, and already both of those guys, Goff and Wentz, have already been shipped off to other teams because their teams just said, we just don't think they've got it. So, I think Dak has proven he's been the class of that class, so to speak. And so he deserves to get paid like it.
And the other thing no one wants to talk about, look, I know the Cowboys' record wasn't great when Dak got hurt, but they were 2-3, and I think you looked at that division. If Dak would have stayed healthy, I think, especially the Cowboys' defense started playing better as the year went on. They weren't as bad as they were when Dak was playing. They would have won that division. And looking at his stat, like through 5 games, Dak was on pace to throw for almost like 6,000 yards. He would have had over 30 touchdowns. Like, I think if Dak would have played the whole season, his numbers would have been nuts. And they may have had to pay him more. So, yeah, I mean, look, this argument, is he elite? Is he not? You made the point, and I agree. He's gotten better. He hasn't gotten worse. Statistically, and they put more on his plate. And yeah, I think he would have had a huge year statistically if he hadn't got hurt in the 5th game. So I would argue that it could have been even more money if he hadn't got hurt. And then we saw how bad things were when he was out. So no brainer.
One of the other arguments they always make against Dak is that he has not had playoff success. He hasn't gone to a Super Bowl. Played in the second round of the playoffs. The one year they got there, got destroyed by the Rams. My argument there is that the overall team was not as good as those teams where the quarterbacks have won Super Bowls. And the other thing that when you compare Dak against the guys who are supposedly the elite quarterbacks, the only one that you can point to and say that, this guy is off the charts, head and shoulders number one above any and all else is Tom Brady. He's won, not only one, but he's won 7. But all the others of the guys that keep getting compared to Dak, who are, supposedly better than Dak, Aaron Rodgers, for as great as he is, and he's supposed to be this much better than
Yeah.
Dak, he's got 1 Super Bowl ring out of all that career, as great as he's been. Patrick Mahomes is young. He's got 1 Super Bowl win. Will he ever get a second one? We don't know. I mean, I'd like to think he's going to. He's certainly got a better team around him. Definitely
Well,
got a better defense around him than
a legend that just retired, 20 years in
that's
the
it.
NFL, Drew Brees had 1.
One. That's it. One. Now they got screwed out of at least 2 NFC championship titles that they should have gone to 2 more Super Bowls at least. But so anyway, what my point being is that those guys are great, but there's a thin line
Yeah.
between the greatness of them and where Dak is. And sometimes that thin line is crossed by the players that are around you. And the Cowboys defense, while it did get a little better last year toward the end, it was still historically bad.
Yeah, it was terrible.
Historically bad. So the Cowboys now have cap space. A great article in the Dallas Morning News by Calvin Watkins on this Tuesday morning that we're recording, saying that even though they've had cap space in the past, they haven't always known what to do with it. They've made some pretty poor decisions on who they've paid in free agency. So I'm not necessarily confident that they're going to get it right this time, but we know they got to address defense. They've got what, 4 extra draft picks, compensatory picks.
Yeah,
So,
that's gonna help.
they got a chance to really fix that defense, but they got to get it right on each one of those picks. And they got to listen to their coaches and they got to listen to their scouting people and pick the best players available. I hope that's where Mike McCarthy and Dan Quinn can have an influence, because they both have Super Bowl rings, and they both know what a Super Bowl defense looks like. And so hopefully with their input, that gives the Cowboys at least a little bit of an edge over what they've had previously, where, you let people talk you into, passing on guys like TJ Watt because he didn't fit their system. It's like, what?
Right.
All right. So you mentioned Drew Brees.
Yes.
And you knew it was coming, but on Sunday, through a very cute Instagram video where all his little ones are all lined up on the couch, the 3 boys are all wearing Drew Brees jerseys, and they announced that Drew Brees is retiring after a 20-year career. Your thoughts about just the contribution that Drew Brees made to the Saints and to the league?
I don't know. Look, you talk about Tom Brady in New England. I think of like John Elway in Denver. I think there's few guys that like they are the franchise. But with Drew Brees, I take it a step further because it's not just the organization. It was what he meant to the city. I mean, you think about what was going on, and I was reading Peter King's article this week talking about everything that was stacked against the Saints at that time. They were coming off a 3-win season when Drew decided to sign with them. Sean Payton had just been hired, but Sean Payton was not the Sean Payton today that everyone thinks is one of the best coaches in the NFL. You had the hurricane. I mean, the city was, I mean, New Orleans wasn't New Orleans anymore. Not what we had known. And what he did was it was like he gave them life. And I don't know that there's a city that resonates more with their football team than New Orleans and the Saints. And not even being from there, you could just see how much he meant to them. All the things he did off the field. And they made it their home. It wasn't one of those things where we come here and I play and then we go somewhere else. No, they made it their home. They committed. They loved the community. It was really an amazing story. And to thank Bryan, I mean, when he signed, he had already played 5 years and really underachieving years with the Chargers. I mean, they didn't even want to keep him. And then to think, if you had told me he was going to have 15 years more in New Orleans, break all these passing records, win a Super Bowl with the Saints. Pretty amazing. Pretty amazing.
And I would, the only thing I would argue is the underachieving part, because he was playing for Marty Schottenheimer most of the time that he was there with the Chargers. And his main mission in life was to hand it off to LaDainian Tomlinson. I thought he played pretty well, but for whatever reason, prior to getting to the Saints and him with a marriage with Sean Payton, for whatever reason, Drew Brees was always considered just good enough. He was okay until we could find the better guy.
Yeah.
Phillip Rivers. And then now I take it a step further. What an indictment that was on the college coaches in the state of Texas when he was coming out of Austin Westlake. and everybody said he's 6 feet tall, he's too small. And this was a conference back in those days where their quarterbacks sucked every year. They were terrible. Texas quarterbacks were awful. A&M quarterbacks were awful. And then they passed on this guy. He goes to Purdue and he finishes second in the Heisman race. You
Yeah.
know, the arrogance of the state of Texas in those days when it came to to their evaluations of quarterbacks was just astounding. And
Well, not even just the state of Texas. I mean, in the
all
NFL,
over. But
I mean, yeah,
I think Purdue was the only Division I offer I think he got.
yeah. But I'll miss seeing him play. Class act. I wish he could have gotten one more Super Bowl. I wish he could have gotten one more shot. Wasn't meant to be, but it doesn't diminish his career. I mean, he had an amazing career. He's an all-time great. He brought a Super Bowl to that community that they'll never forget. And yeah, good for him to walk out while he can. And he's going to be working, I guess, for NBC, doing Notre Dame football, and going to be studio analyst for Sunday Night Football. So he's already got his next gig lined up. So good for him.
And I predict he's not going to be sitting on that set very long. I think he's going to be in the booth sooner than later.
Yeah, probably. You're probably
calling
right.
that Sunday night game. That's just my opinion. March Madness. We are actually
my favorite thing. My favorite thing.
It's honestly that's my favorite sporting event as well. Those 3 weeks in March and now early April are the most exciting in sports normally, or at least it used to be. Back when you had college basketball and you could name the players, which meant they stayed more than a half a year. Okay. That's not so much the case anymore, but just the fact that we've gotten here, because we recall it was a year ago, conference tournaments were just getting started when everything shut down and everybody was told to go home. And what a gut punch that was for me, for you, for all college basketball fans. But also think about those teams that were so good and thought this was their year and then had it snapped away from them and weren't even able to have the opportunity to finish out and see if they could win a national championship.
Yeah, so many seniors never even got the chance.
Yeah, and there's only like 5 seniors playing in college basketball, but those 5 seniors deserve their shot,
Well, that's
mid
only at
majors.
the power teams.
Yeah,
There's
I agree.
Mid-major, and I mean these guys, and you're seeing this year actually. And I know I follow college basketball more than you do.
I try to, but I just can't keep up with it.
Yeah, I love college basketball. After football,
too.
college basketball is my passion. So you're seeing this year, it was the veteran teams in a lot of cases that were the better teams. But it's a relief to have, last year was a gut punch. You were saying we were a gut punch for us. I was on my way to a conference tournament to watch as a fan when they canceled it. And then 2 days later, it went from, 2 days before Selection Sunday, we were going to a tournament. And then 2 days later, no NCAA tournament. So it was a little crazy. There are probably going to be some hiccups because there could be teams that get to move on, Bryan, without even having to play, because the deadline is, we're recording this on Tuesday. The deadline is today, actually. For if any teams, replacement teams would have to come in to take over for any team that had a bunch of positives.
Yeah, there's 4 teams sitting out there right now waiting to see if they may have to step in and take the place.
But I think the odds are pretty small.
Sure.
And all these teams are basically quarantining because they're not going to take any chances that got in. But you could end up, if something happens on a Friday, someone from Arkansas, and then a 14 seed gets to move on because they didn't get to play. I don't know how that's going to work. If there's a player, does the whole team have to sit out? I still don't quite understand that, because in the conference tournaments, there were some teams that completely bowed out, and then there were other teams that still played, but maybe it was because it was contact tracing. All the thing confuses me, but we could see teams actually getting to move on without having to play. I hope that doesn't happen. hopefully we'll get the games in. And they're all going to be in Indiana. Like, they're not going to be spread out over the country. They're all playing in Indiana. They're going to be playing in several different arenas around the Indianapolis area. So it's still going to be great for TV, and we're going to be watching.
And, well, and just you mentioned players, teams just advancing without having to play. I mean, the Big 12 champion, Texas,
Yeah.
didn't have to play against Kansas in the
Right.
semifinals.
Yeah.
And now I see a lot of the ESPN pickers have, at least 2 or 3 of them have Texas as a potential Final Four team, and I'm going, I'm not quite sure I understand the thinking there. They're good, but they didn't exactly dominate that conference.
The funny thing with the Big 12 is I could see 3 or 4 or 5 Big 12 teams possibly making it to the Final Four.
Baylor.
I think Oklahoma State, they have more quad 1 wins. I think them and Illinois have the most quad 1 wins in the country. I still think Baylor can make it, because it's all about the path and the matchups. And Kansas, they were not great early. They got a lot better late, but now they have all these COVID issues, so you just don't know. So yeah, Oklahoma has tailed off. I mean, they've lost 6 of 7. Texas is talented, but Texas always seems, when you think, oh man, they've turned the corner, they end up laying an egg at the most inopportune time. So the Big 12 was really good. There's 7 teams that could at least make it to the Sweet 16, I think, out of that conference. But we'll see. My favorite in all this, I think, and it's not, they've been undefeated all year, and it's not because they're undefeated. I think Gonzaga got the best bracket you could possibly get. They've beaten all of the higher seeds in their region that they might have to play. I think they have such a great chance to get to the Final Four, and then they're talented enough. I think this could finally be, as much success as they've had, they've never won it. I think this could be the year that they finally do it. And another school, I think, Brian, we thought they're a football school. Watch out for Alabama.
Hey,
Alabama could make a run, and I wouldn't be surprised if they get to the Final Four.
I wouldn't either. And I was proud that my LSU Tigers played them to a 1-point game in the SEC championship, but there was no question in my mind who the better team was. They played great defense. The thing you mentioned earlier, seniors, they got 3 seniors on that team that have been playing together. That's the heart and soul of that team. It used to be back in the day, I always said the teams with the best point guards were going to win. Kemba Walker comes in and he just carries Connecticut all the way. Bobby Hurley, those years that Duke was there, they looked at all the other folks, but to me, Bobby Hurley was the difference. He was the great point guard. So the guys with the great point guards, I used to think were the teams that had were the favorites. Now I look at the teams that had the experience. It's not that, and you'll notice this year because of COVID and what it did, the one and dones really struggled. The Dukes, the Kentuckys, because they had no chance to create any chemistry. They had to be isolated when they weren't practicing together. They just didn't get a chance to build as teams like they would normally do. So I agree with you. I think Gonzaga is really good. I love the hot team going into a tournament now. And as far as I can see, Gonzaga's never been cold. So yeah, you got to go with that. But I'll tell you, the hot team in the top 4 seeds, Illinois. Illinois 3 weeks ago, it was Michigan and Ohio State. Illinois was considered a good basketball team, but there was nobody talking about them being a number 1 seed. And in the last 3 weeks, they just went on a tear. And if you watch the Big Ten championship, and I have not watched a lot of Big Ten basketball, my honesty is I watched some Big 12 and I watched a lot of LSU basketball, which is a lot of SEC games. That game between Ohio State and Illinois, there were some grown men. There were some 40-year-olds playing in that game. These guys are all looking like NBA. They look like NFL tight ends. They're massive.
And the Big Ten this year was probably not the best league. I was talking about the Big 12 as teams. You look at Illinois, you look at Michigan. Another team that's in the first 4 is going to play UCLA. Michigan State.
Yep.
All right. They've beaten 3 of the 4 1 seeds.
Yep.
They're a 12 seed. They have Tom Izzo, who has a history of winning in March. they've already beaten 3 of the 4 1 seeds, so they're not scared of anybody. You
Can
could
you
see any of these teams make a run.
Can you imagine a play-in game featuring Michigan State and
And
UCLA,
UCLA.
two of the most storied programs in the history of college basketball, and they've got to play in to get into the tournament, to go ahead and get into the 64. The other thing, talking about Gonzaga, the thing that's impressive about Gonzaga is that they've beaten three teams that were high seed teams this year: Virginia, Kansas, Iowa. They scored almost 300 points in those three games. They didn't
Yeah,
just beat these three teams who are all really good basketball teams. They crushed them.
yeah.
I mean, they've got offense out the wazoo. And I mean, it's just you just think you wonder about it for Mark Few, because he's been there. He's built that program up. I remember when Gonzaga first, back when John Stockton was playing for him, they were a cute little story, and
Right.
they had
They
a
were a
good
fun story. Yeah.
good, Adam Morrison the year that he was the player of the year. Cute little story, but you knew that they weren't going to win a championship. And then as they, kept going on, they got into a championship game one year and barely lost. And you just always knew, okay, at some point this is just going to run out of gas. Well, they've become a top five program on a year to
Yeah.
year basis. The problem has been they just never have been able to finish it. And you wonder if they don't finish it this year, is this the best last chance for Gonzaga?
I don't think it's their last chance. I think it's absolutely their best chance because I think they're so talented. It's hard for them too because they play in a conference where they're not really tested. I think, it's human nature. They get bored through the season. Their non-conference is the fun part where they're
Yep.
playing. And that now, where they've arrived as a program is anybody will play them because it's a huge game. And if you lose to them, it's not a big deal, where they can schedule a Virginia and a Kansas and a who was Iowa, and
Iowa.
they can play. And every year they're doing that. They get invited to the big tournaments, preseason tournaments. So, but they did have, they had a couple good teams. BYU gave them at least a half of good basketball in the Big West Championship game. But they're so talented, and I think if they're dialed in, this is definitely their best chance because there haven't been they've been the best dominant team. Otherwise, really this year it's Illinois, like you said a few weeks ago. I don't think any of us had them there. Now they're crazy. Baylor was my favorite, and now they've kind of tailed off. I still think they're good enough to get there, but their COVID break, killed some of their momentum, so they've lost a couple games. So definitely think this is their best chance to do it. And honestly, I think it would be cool to see a Gonzaga win a turn, see what Mark Few has done with that program. I think he deserves to win one, but it's hard to win 6 straight games. It's really tough. It's why it's one of the hardest things. You get one game, it's not a series, and if you're not on that day, you're just out.
Well, and you mentioned it. I mean, right now there's no dominant team. There's no one team that you can point. There's 6 or 7 teams you could
Right.
say every one of these has got a real good shot to win it. And I, like you, I like Alabama. I really think they've got a real good shot to win the thing. I like Baylor. The reason I like Alabama and Baylor this year is because they play great defense.
Yeah, and
And
defense always carries. Yeah.
there's been a lot of years where people just didn't put much stock into playing a lot of great defense. But you look at the team that Anthony Davis was on with Kentucky. They had great one and done players, but man, they played great defense, great team defense. And so I'm always kind of drawn to those kind of teams. But it is, I mean, it's a coin toss this year. You could absolutely see a lot more surprises. Another Loyola Chicago, they're back in it. I mean, who knows what this thing's going to be like? And that's what's so great about it. I just really, really hope that the tournament's not spoiled by some team getting hit by COVID,
Yeah.
and not being able to finish the deal, having to pull out of the tournament and get sent home. I saw a tap school in Texas this week that was going to play for the state championship, and on the day before the game, they had to send in a letter to the TAPS organization telling them that they had a player that tested positive for COVID, and they were going to have to pull out and not play in the state championship game. What a gut punch!
Yeah.
So it's great to have basketball. Don't even care about the NBA right now. We'll get to that soon.
Yeah.
But the main thing is March Madness is here, and we're looking for. And even this is going to be weird because it's going to be Friday, Sunday games, and Saturday, Monday games
Yeah, and
this year.
the first four games are going to be Thursday,
Right.
which normally we're early in the week.
And
So
see,
yeah.
this just deprives us, Ryan. It deprives us of an entire day of screwing off when we're supposed to be working. You know, we'll
Well,
all be
yeah, no, Thursday and Friday of opening week were always like a holiday for me. I mean, they were my favorite days, just turning on the TV and watching games all day Thursday and Friday. So,
I
um,
got I got the chance back in the day when I was young and a sportscaster up in Chattanooga. I got the chance to cover a couple of NCAA tournament opening rounds. One year University of Chattanooga was playing against the Oklahoma team that played and lost to Danny and the Miracles in the championship. And so I got to watch Popeye Jones and Murray State on a buzzer beater upset on day one. I got to see a first round weekend in Knoxville back when LSU had Chris Jackson, Shaquille O'Neal, and Stanley Roberts up against Lethal Weapon 3 in Georgia Tech with Dennis Scott and Kenny Anderson, and the guy from Chattanooga was Malcolm Mackey, and LSU had a 25-3 lead in that game and lost. So that's hard to do.
my one of my that it was crazy memory. So I covered two NCAA tournaments in the 2002, 2003, working in Wichita. We were covering KU. Those KU teams were loaded. They had Kirk Heinrich, Nick Collison, Drew Gooden, all guys that played in the NBA. And they they played Holy Cross. They were 1 seed. They played Holy Cross as a 16 seed in St. Louis, and they were losing in the second half. And I was thinking, this is the coolest thing ever. I'm going to get to cover this team all the way to the Final Four, and they're going to be the first #1 seed to ever lose to a 16 seed. And I'm trying to remember, it was about the 8-minute mark of the game. KU finally went on a little flurry and came back and won. And then they and survived the 16 seed. And then they ended up making a run to the Final Four. They went to the Final Four 2 years in a row. I got to see Carmelo Anthony and Dwayne Wade at the Final Four. So out of all the things I've covered, it's for me, it's been the most. It's just the feel of it. And I know this year it'll be different because it won't be a full stadium. But it's something about it when you get to sit courtside like media, when you get to sit
Yeah.
closer, it's amazing to see these guys. And like you said back then, when stars were playing longer or hanging around longer, yeah, I just love it. It's my favorite thing, and I can't wait for basketball Thursday.
Got one other story because I did get to go to one Final Four. It was down in New Orleans, and it was a year when Eric Montross and North Carolina won the
Oh
national
wow,
championship.
yeah,
But that year, the Final Four was Kentucky, Kansas, North Carolina, all basketball blue
blue
bloods,
bloods.
and the Fab Five as
Oh
freshmen.
my gosh,
Okay.
you could argue that's the best Final Four ever in
I
terms of
mean, just
standard.
and you put 80,000 people in the Superdome, and I was sitting
Yeah,
in the nosebleeds, and the Fab Five played Jamal Mashburn and Kentucky. Rick Pitino was the coach, and it was a double overtime game that the Fab Five won, and then they went on and lost in the championship when Chris Rubber made
the
the
timeout.
fatal turn a timeout that they didn't have, got a technical, and North Carolina wins it. Got to see Dean Smith kicked out of a game in the semifinals. I mean, it was everything. So college basketball, so many great memories, and there's nothing more fun than when a team goes on the run and the crowd just erupts. And
Yeah.
if you're on the losing end of that, and that noise is coming down on top of you like a roof, it's a wonderful thing.
And in the early rounds, it's always you have fans for each school, but when the underdog starts winning or starts making a push,
Oh
then
yeah.
everybody outside of the fans of the favorite, everyone starts going nuts cheering for the underdog. It's like you all of a sudden get a bunch of new fans. So
VCU, Shaka
yeah,
Smart.
it's an amazing event to go to, and I'll be glad when we have normal capacity, hopefully in the future.
Me too. Hey, buddy, thank you for doing this as always. Have a great week. We'll look forward to talking to you next week. That's Ryan. I'm Bryan. We'll drop this thing today on March the 16th. Happy March Madness. Happy St. Patrick's Day. A great day for aspirin companies all over the world. So be careful out there. Any final words before I let you go?
No, just ready for basketball.
Just I got to go to work.
I actually do.
All right, buddy. See you later on. Hey, be sure and subscribe to the channel and check us out. Leave comments. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks for watching.